So we're looking here at offenses, and we talked about recognizing offenses. We had our introduction to offenses, talked about recognizing offenses. We looked at their possibility. We talked about their source. I don't know, I'm getting like bombed here with phone calls, but we'll just ignore that. So their source, and one of the things that we didn't really spend a lot of time really digging in, although it was a whole message between their source and their cause. I think it's important here to just, even though we're going to kind of get into how you react to offenses and respond to offenses and resist offenses, and we're going to talk about, restoring the offender and contending, contention, contentiousness, all of those things. We're going to deal with all that as we go through this study. But it's important right here to just take a moment, and we're kind of recapping, kind of just ad-libbing based off of what Brother Daryl brought up. Don't be offended. I'm just trying to remember. Derek, not Daryl. Derek, yeah. Brother Daryl was over there next to him, so I get you guys sit so close to each other. Daryl, Derek, and yeah, exactly. And so, anyways, but Daryl does have the better beard. I have to say that. So, anyways, I always have to compliment Brother Daryl's beard. Anyway, so and hopefully that doesn't offend Brother Derek. But no, I'm just kidding. you got a good beard going too, but you got to attain to the Hawkins beard someday. So, anyways, we're getting off topic here. So about offenses, and I know, you know what, man, this is a hot topic. I got to take this jacket off. Now the topic, it's hard to just follow the study. Honestly, it is, because as we start going through the study, there are so many triggers and things that just I'm reminded of, or practical examples that just fly in our faces and stuff. And so, I want to just review real quick here, letter B and C. Maybe we'll get into letter D, or maybe we'll just review letter D and C, or B and C, and later on mess with that. So we have to recognize that the source of offense is not it's not the wisdom of God, the source of offenses. Now, whether it is the offender or the offended that is in the wrong, and in most cases both are in some wrong a lot of times, but whether it's intentional or unintentional, offenses are the issue of offenses. It's deeper than what we want to make it out to be. Wednesday night last week, actually, I mentioned just in brief. I was preaching at McGregor Road, and I mentioned we talked about how fire shall try, and I was in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, and the context of this fire shall try every man's work. The work that's being spoken of there is the building of a church, and so I discussed how the fiery trials are going to try churches and individuals, and even referred to how Brother Kaiser mentioned, I came over here and I got over here next to Brother Rob Horton. He was sitting over in this area of the church building, and I said, the fiery darts of the wicked oftentimes happen, and they're well placed generally from the direction of another brother. The fiery darts of the wicked sometimes are like, did you see what she did? Sometimes it's something that she did, but it was the wicked that put incendiaries in that. And it was something that maybe she was throwing your way, but she didn't mean it to be fiery. And I'm not trying to, give any particular, whatever, but we'll say that Emmeline says something to Brother Jim, and she doesn't mean anything mean by it, but the wicked one gets in there and stirs it up. And Brother Jim starts thinking, whoa, 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 whoa. What'd she mean by that? And then she finds out, and she's like, man, I shouldn't have said that, but I didn't mean anything bad about it. I just said he was tall or whatever, you know. I'm not picking at you, Brother Jim. I don't mean to offend you or anything. I was just looking for something, you know, or that he had a blue shirt on, and you know, and then he thought that because I said he had a blue shirt on, there was something wrong with that. But I didn't mean anything bad by it. I'm speaking for her. She says, I didn't mean anything bad by it, but he thought that she did. Well, you see, it's not necessarily, okay, now you can sit there. It's not necessarily that he was in the wrong or she was in the wrong in that particular sense. It's that something got stirred up that shouldn't have been stirred up. Sometimes, though, what she says, I'm not saying her particularly, I'm just using an innocent example, but sometimes what she says, she means to be funny, or she means to be not mean or not whatever, and she says it, and she says it about him, but then Daryl gets offended about it because it also applies to him, or he thinks that she means it for both of them, or he thinks that she shouldn't have disrespected him in that way. But in all reality, she wasn't trying to be disrespectful. Now, was she? Maybe. And you know what? If she was, she needs to correct it. She needs to get it right. But a lot of times, I need to stop using you as an example, don't I? Hey, don't be a stumbling block. I almost tripped over him. So, no, a lot of times what happens, though, is something that's not meant to be bad is hurtful. But let me say that both parties have the opportunity to grow there. Because what she said, in this particular case, we'll say, for example, she needs to learn that sometimes that hurts people. And so she's got to be careful what she says and how she says it, even if she thinks it's cute. Cute and cuddly, she says. I don't know that I've ever heard any phrases that are cute and cuddly, but anyways. But here's the thing, though. Well-meaning people sometimes say things that really hurt people. And we got to be careful about that. I'm sure I probably said something in the last 20 minutes that hurt somebody. I'm sorry if I did have, but we have to be careful about that. And by the way, sometimes people will pick on people. And let me give an example. And this happens, you know, the brethren. I'm telling you, if you have, I want to encourage you to go on Baptist history tours. But if you go on a men's tour, thicken your skin before you go, because they're constantly ripping on each other. And it's not like they're ripping on each other like meaning to be malicious or anything like that. But they pick at this and pick at that, and everybody's ha 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 ha. You know, it's okay. But you know what? It hurts sometimes. It hurts sometimes. You know, I get car sick really bad motion sick. Okay, my first Baptist history tour was a men's tour, and I was in the back of the bus. Started out back there. I even was taking medicine to try to not be, you know. And I sat as close to the front as I could, which was like 3/4 of the way to the back. And I'm like turning green back there, and I'm like sweating because I'm getting motion sick and I'm getting hot. And I was sending text messages to somebody up front. We'll just say it that way. And then there's an announcement over the intercom. If the people from Indiana could stop whining in the back of the bus. And I'm like, oh, man. What's that? Yes. Now, at that moment, I was pretty hurt. Then I threw up on his shoes. No, I'm just kidding. No, I was pretty hurt. But you know what? I just dealt with it. And then later on, when I had the chance, I put him in a headlock and pulled his hair out. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I did. I took him aside and I said, brother, I think it was a little bit cruel, but I just need you to understand that maybe you didn't realize that I get very, very motion sick. I said, and it will probably determine whether or not I ever go on another tour. And I've been on every tour every year ever since then. But I said, I have to be either somewhere where I can see the road real clearly. And I'll be honest, sometimes I'm sitting up front and I still get motion sick. But I said, I've got to be, you know, and you know what he did? The second day, when I got on the bus, he said, hey, I moved so-and-so, won't you sit here? I said, man, you didn't have to move somebody. He said, they don't get motion sick. And I was sitting right behind him in the second seat and had some good fellowship. And he said, brother, I just want you to know that I get really motion sick too. And I understand. And he never apologized for the, picking at me, whining in the back of the bus. But it wasn't just me. I was sending him texts saying, hey, brother, could you turn the AC down? But the other thing to mention, though, is the other person, like y'all know I get hot anyways, okay? Hence, it's what, 45 degrees out, and I had to take my suit coat off because I'm burning up. It's 68 degrees up here, man. Anybody cold? No, everybody's good. All right. Of course you're cold, right? Of course, Arizonian. Or Californian. What do they call people from California? Californians? There you go. Californian. There you go. I don't want to use any, offensive terminology when I'm talking about not offending. So anyways, how we deal with things is important too, but we have to realize that, so from two perspectives, okay, whether we are the offended or the offender, we have to realize, and we have to realize that that does happen even between good people, well-meaning people. And when it does, we have to deal with it. And man, we got to watch out, because this thing, I mean, that's what the whole letter C here. I mean, the tongue, it's wicked. We say things that cut so deep, may as well just cut the head off. And it's something that every person is always going to struggle with, getting their words right so that they're not coming across. And sometimes it's not even just the words, it's how it's said. Yes, sir. Sorry, I didn't mean to hold you off so long. I just
about a couple of verses in Proverbs that kind of touch on what we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 11, verse 9 says, "A hypocrite with his mouth destroys his neighbor.
Yeah.
But through knowledge shall the just be delivered."
Say 11:9.
11:9.
Okay.
And in, we talk about dealing with situations sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 14, verse 7 says, "Go from the presence of a foolish man without perceiving not his idiom, the lips of knowledge." And
Mm-hmm.
we were talking about sometimes things are said without knowing that that person's offended, or not knowing the situation behind why the individual is that way.
Right.
And we take some of that stuff to heart.
Oh yeah.
And I know myself, when that comes at me, I'm going the other way because I won't be bothered.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to confront the situation because I know how I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I can be really, really ugly retaliating behind situations like
Sure.
that. And I don't want that conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So I just go the other way. I try to avoid it, stay out of your way, you stay out of my way. Mm-hmm. But sometimes that's impossible to do.
Oh yeah.
So the Bible also talks about things done in jest.
Mm-hmm. So and it's important to remove yourself from a situation that's going to cause more trouble. You know, there's some stuff in the book of Proverbs, and some other verses that deal with stirring up strife. And you know, if you know that there's another thing about holding your peace until you have a more opportunity to say something. So it's sometimes, hey, sometimes it's the right time. Somebody said something, you say, hey, brother, that was pretty mean. Or that, you know, you might have thought that was funny, but think about how it might affect somebody else. And then there's the other side too, that sometimes it's not the right time to just like correct somebody on the spot. Sometimes it's better to wait until, you know, the attitude, the atmosphere has changed. Because sometimes what's happening is you have an atmosphere of giddiness about just, you know, general joy and funny, and then somebody says something inappropriate, and then you're like, you know, and everybody thinks, I mean, everything up to that point was funny. And so then they say something, I think you crossed the line there, you know, but it's not necessarily the time to fix it right then. Sometimes it's like, okay, mental note, this needs to be fixed at some point when I'm not so upset about it. Because, you know, sometimes I have that problem. Sometimes somebody will get me upset about something. I'm like, well, I'm supposed to fix it. I better fix it, you know, and then I go and I'm still obviously flustered, and then I don't fix it right because I'm flustered. So I have to step back and say, okay, I need to deal with this. Pray the Lord would give me grace to deal with it the right way, and then go deal with it. You know, sometimes with it, when it's family, or if it's, you know, a close brother in Christ, and you're like, man, you ought to know better, you know, but then coming across that way, they're like, then you're like, okay, maybe I need to wait until I have a perfect moment, and then say, hey, brother, let's talk about this when it can be properly focused on. Yes, sir.
Oh, the Bible talks about the edification of the saints.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question is, I guess, is if we're constantly putting each other down in a justifiable type way, tell me where the edification comes in, because there's no edification in putting somebody down.
Yeah.
Whether you mean it or not, or whether it's funny or not, or
right.
whether it's
Well,
or not, there's no edification.
There are some things that people joke about that aren't a joke ever. Shouldn't be joked about. And that's neither edifying nor helpful. But the other side of that is recognizing where everybody's at. So I can't, you know, she must be back there helping with the kids, the one I was using as an example a minute ago. Okay. So we'll use my daughter that I was talking about, for example. She's 7 years old. Okay. And there are some things that she just doesn't know. Now, she's 7 years old, and so everybody's like, yeah, I mean, she's 7 years old. Duh. She doesn't know how to be socially. She has no filter, is what my wife says. She has no filter. It's like, you know, walk up to somebody and, hey, why? And like, I'm like, I don't know who that is. I'm out of here. You know, they ask questions, you know. It's like when you take the kids to the grandparents' house and the grandparents don't live for the Lord, and you're like, okay, kids, you're going to see this and this and this. Now, maybe it's appropriate to just let them fly. Hey, you know, Grandpa, why you smoke? Hey, that's a good question. Just let them answer it. You know. But when they ask other questions, why this? Now, we recognize children are children. And so, you know, when somebody says, why are you bald? Well, I mean, part of the reason I'm bald is because I shave it. But the other reason, it's just something to do with, you know, like my dad he balded. Yeah. He was balding right here, you know. I just figure, you know, hey, trying to like comb it over, for me, it's so thin, it just looks, I mean, I think it's okay. My wife's like, that looks goofy. You need to cut that off. And so, but anyways, I'm like, I mean, it doesn't bother me. That's superficial stuff. I don't, it doesn't bother me. But, if a kid asks me, why you bald? I say, well, why are you so young? No, no, but those are things where you kind of joke back and forth, and they'll joke about, I want to say kids it's funny. I'm only 34 years old. Okay. And like, kids at their school, they think I'm old. And they're like, why are you so old? I'm like, I mean, what's that? I mean, it's like, they're they're just like, oh, you're old or whatever. I'm like, all right, let's do some push-ups. And they're like, no, I can't do it. I was like, hey, I'm old. You're not. Come on, let's do it. Anyways, no, there are some things though that people ask that kids have no filter on one side. And then when they start to learn to have a filter, and then they say something, and then you're like, filter broke. All right, kid, listen. It's not appropriate to publicly ask that. Now, if you wonder about something, somebody's got some health problem or something, it's like, you have somebody. So they ask me, why am I bald? I mean, that doesn't bother me any. I laugh about it. I think it's funny, the bald thing for me. It doesn't bother me any. But let's say my wife has cancer and she's bald. And then they ask, why are you bald? Now, we probably would have by that point dealt with, well, because she has cancer or she's had cancer, and we just handle it, but when it becomes something where, well, something I don't have control over, it's the way it is, and that goes for, there's some things, asking questions like, why do you shave your head? That's, if it's just because I shave my head, whatever. Then there's other things where, if it's something that's outside of somebody's control, or it's something that they're really trying to work on growing in, like they're struggling with something. And hey, my dad died of lung cancer from smoking. And my mom's, we just had a scare about lung cancer for her. And so that's kind of a tender area for me. And so when I see somebody that I love smoking, I'm like, stop it. Don't do that. It's not good for you. I don't want to watch you die of lung cancer. I don't like watching people suffocate to death. But there's certain times though when somebody's really working on something, struggling with it, and they're having a hard time. Maybe somebody, they're trying hard, but they're failing, but they're trying hard, and they're just, sometimes, you know what, you just love them. And then when it's appropriate, then you try to help them. But sometimes it gets old to get beat up over something over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. I know. I mean, I don't get beat up over stuff that much anymore, but there have been things in my life I've got beat up over and beat up over and beat up over and beat up over and beat up over. I'm like, could you stop beating me up? But eventually the Lord gave me victory, and I said, hey, beat me up, because it's gone now. But some things, now choice things where I have a choice, and you want to point it out, sometimes it might hurt a little, but it's something that I need to consider, and okay, I need to work on that. But things where I may not have a choice, might be an issue of, something where I might be a little more tender. I'll give an example, just a personal example. You can pick on me a little bit for if I overeat. because I have a discipline issue there. Okay. But I have a physical capability of burning it off. And so if I'm doing that, pick on me, okay? Because I can fix that. But some people can't, because there's a medical issue. And it's not about how much you eat necessarily. There was a time when I was on certain medication where it didn't matter if I ate 1 meal a day or 18 meals a day, I was retaining about everything that, I gained weight. I think I gained like 30, 40 pounds. I was on some migraine medicine that had some side effect that would make you gain weight. Now I lost it all. As soon as I got off the stuff, it was like, and I was like, and that tells you that I didn't have any medical issues that would keep me gaining weight. But not that's an issue that a lot of times people will look at and they'll think that it's a discipline issue every time, but it's not always. In fact, most of the time it's not. Sometimes it is, but it's not always an issue of discipline. It's sometimes an issue of somebody had a medical problem and they had to take certain medications that just wasn't nice to their body. And how do we deal with that? We just deal with it. It's life. In some cases, it just can't be fixed. And we just pray for their health where they're at, and yes, sir.
You bring that up because one of the things that I get beat up over is about a small guy. And even if I lost 100 pounds.
Talking about height?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Even if I lost 100 pounds, guess what? I still was a small guy. So, and what people don't know, I get things like, oh, he's going to the buffet. They hate to see him coming because he's going to eat the place out of house alone. And I know smaller people eat 5 times as much as I do.
I'll tell you what, that's my problem. I go to the buffet and I eat too much.
What people don't realize is part of the reason why I'm such a large guy is because I had a medical condition, I had a respiratory problem. And for the better part of 5 or 6 years, they gave me steroids to help alleviate it. Well, this is a product of steroid use, especially if you're not working out or anything.
Right.
And turning that stuff into some kind of muscle, which is not good either. But, it's just bugs me sometimes when people stereotype you because you're not itty bitty like they are.
Sure.
Well, I hate to see you coming because you're going to eat about a house alone. And I'm like, come on, man.
So,
probably what the situation would make, you wouldn't say that. But,
sure. And so there's a good example of careful what we say because we don't always know how it's going to affect other people. Now, I might joke about, my problem, but you know what? Hey, it's really not all that funny that I sometimes lack discipline in that area and I need to deal with it. Like I see a cake and it doesn't stand a chance. All right. So I got to back off. Okay, wait a minute, hold on. And so, and I was actually, that's why my wife gives me this piece of cake on her birthday on Sunday night. I mean, everybody else is walking in, getting a little piece of cake and they're getting a little sliver and whatever. My wife hands me this cake. It's like this big old piece of cake. I'm like looking at everybody else. I'm like, we're running out of cake. We're running out of cake. And I've got the biggest piece of cake in the room. And so, yeah, the yellow cake, that little bit of yellow cake, and I was like, so I ended up like splitting it with Isaac, but, and I'm like, I'll be straightforward with you. Pastor has a little stumbling block with food. And as long as I stay under about 230, I think I'll be okay. But I will say that I have now, since the accident, it's been a little harder to get to be consistent with going to the gym because sometimes I wake up and I'm in a lot of pain and I just can't get moving, or because work keeps me up half the night and it's hard to get up to get out and go to the gym. But before that, I went every single day of the week, every single weekday, and watched what I was eating, and I lost 10 pounds, and I would gain 10 pounds, and I would lose 10 pounds, and I would gain 10 pounds. And I'm like, man, I'm not going to go get on that scale anymore. I'm just going to do what I'm doing. But hey, to me, you know, as far as weight and whatever, I mean, I'll just work out, and hey, I know I'm in shape-ish, you know, I'm strong. I'm not overeating. And you know what? If I stay this exact, you know, physique, so to speak, whatever, you know, as long as I'm not like worn out and can't hardly get anything done because I'm so, because I'm not disciplined. And that's where I'm like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have eaten that fourth donut Sunday morning. Yeah. And so, you know, Sunday's usually my splurge day, you know, and so, you know, maybe I splurge a little too much and I need to watch it. But as far as offense and things, we do need to be careful. You know, you're not going to offend pastor about, you know, pastor, hey, put that donut down. I'll laugh and say, you know, turn around and eat it. But, and then you pick on me when I'm like, why am I so fat? You say, I told you not to eat that donut. But anyways, we got to be careful. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say this topic resonates really well with me, just because whenever Professor was born, he told his dad had a colostomy bag. There's a lot of adults that just don't have a filter, you know.
Yeah.
And at first, I was really kind of ashamed by it because we were doing his pictures, his 3-month-old pictures, and I was like, should we have this bag in pictures, you know, newborn pictures, real cute. And anyways, for a long time, it was hard to tell people would ask questions about it. They just didn't know what it was and they were going to. But then after a while, like it just became a blessing to us. Like we couldn't imagine him without it.
Right. He doesn't have it anymore.
No, he doesn't. He has a big scar, but it was
Right.
still like we just always look back on memories that we had with him and just
Yeah.
like, trying to learn how to be parents and how to change the
Yeah.
food sack thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's see, the things, drive safe. Oh, you're still getting ready. Sorry. Drive safe. Have a good night at work. See you, Lucas. So there's there are a lot of things. Honestly, most of the time we offend most in areas where we don't understand somebody else's situation. And that is, and it's not that we're a fool in the sense that we don't understand and don't care to understand. It's just that we don't understand. And sometimes because we don't understand, we, yeah, you probably ought to put that on. It's cold. It's raining. Hold his Bible for him, brother. So a lot of times it is a matter where we don't understand. And if we did understand, most of the time we probably just watch what we say. And so, and that's where, like me, where I have an issue and somebody says something, I'm like, man, they don't even know my situation. But then I think about it. I'm like, wait a minute. That's exactly the point. They don't know my situation, so I can't expect them to understand. So I look for an opportunity to explain my situation. I say, hey, what's that? You sweating? It's 45 degrees out there. And so, you know, sometimes I have to say, oh, you know what? They don't know the situation. So I need to take the opportunity to kindly explain the situation and kind of step back and say, okay, should I be hurt by what they're saying? Because they don't know that what they're saying even has the possibility of hurting me. Because the next guy isn't hurt by it, but I am, because they don't understand my situation. So I have to stop and say, well, wait a minute. Okay, maybe I just need to explain the situation and say, hey, you know, brother, if you could maybe just lay off the talk about that. It just kind of bugs me a little bit because this is my background, you know, and if I had my choice, the thing that you're picking at wouldn't be an issue to me because if I had my choice, it wouldn't be that way. You know, there's, oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And sometimes we just got to get to know each other well enough. And I'll tell you, by the way, once we know each other real well, it gets worse. Yeah, it gets worse. That's exactly right. The better you get to know somebody, the more you think you can take liberty with them. And then you say something and they're like, then they're like, don't call you for a few days. And you're like, what did I offend you? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. What, and it's like one of the guys at one of the adjustment firms that I work with. He's a file reviewer. They hadn't given me any work since like June or July or something. And I called and I was like, hey, I'm working on this file. And he's like, Aaron Campbell. He said, man, I thought I made you mad or something. You hadn't called me in months. I said, I haven't had any files, man. He's kidding. But anyways, that sometimes we see that's what people just tend to do is distance themselves when they get offended. And most of the time, the person that offended them has no clue that they offended them. And not only do they have no clue that they offended them, if they knew, they'd be heartbroken. They'd be upset about it. They'd be torn up and say, you know what, man, I really, really didn't mean to hurt you. I really didn't want to hurt you. Now, then there's the guy like you were talking about, putting on pig nose and really like ripping you and giving you a hard time. I mean, now maybe he didn't know that it hurt you. I doubt it. When you're getting that far, you kind of crossed the line about, 3 weeks ago. What's that? Oh, you know what you're doing. Yeah. And when it gets that far, yeah, a stern rebuke's probably in order. You say, hey, look, man, I think you're just being a little inappropriate here. And now, if it's me you're picking on and it's something that's not outside of my control, then, they picked on me at the youth center. Indirectly, they had this skit or whatever, and they were talking about it was a skit, and it was stupid. But anyways, these girls were like, they'd say something and they'd say, ew, and they'd say, and then one of them was Crocs, ew. And you know what? Hey, I walked up there and I said, woo, got my Crocs on you. They pick on that and whatever. But anyways, and then next time because I actually stopped wearing Crocs shortly after that. Not like I stopped wearing, I just stopped wearing them out and about because I had to wear a suit, and so I'm wearing dress shoes. And so, they, for about 3 or 4 months, or 2 or 3 months, I just wasn't wearing Crocs. They're like, you aren't wearing Crocs. I said, yeah, see, you offended me. I had to get rid of them all. I mean, I wasn't about to wear Crocs back in here and get roasted. No, I'm just kidding. And then I wore them, last week or 2 weeks ago or whatever, last time I went in there, and the guy that was ribbing me about it, I said, hey, he said, what are those? I said, those are Crocs, man. The best shoes made. And he was like, but those are, obviously I'm not going to get offended about Crocs, but yes, sir.
Can I give you a scenario that talks about what you do, like when you go to recruit somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody says something to you that you think is kind of inappropriate, and you do it the right way. You call the person off and say,
Mm-hmm.
what's the first thing out of their mouth? I've had this happen a million times. What's the matter with you? You can't take it till now we're into escalation.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't think it was a joke,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously you did.
Sure.
So, okay, if that's the way you feel, I'll wait.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, it all has to do with when you bring it up and how you bring it up. Because, if you bring it up while they're joking, that's going to be the response. Whoa, hey, wait a minute, I'm just joking. What's going on? Now you give it a little bit of time, let everybody kind of calm down a little bit, let them calm down from their joking. You calm down from, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with joking as long as your joking isn't degrading and tearing down someone else. As long as that, now, you know, we often joke and tear ourselves down, and that's a common, you know, that's a common thing. Now, when somebody jumps on it and says, yeah, let me tell you, you know, and they jump on, let me tell you all about, you know, how messed up you are in that area, you know, then you're kind of like, whoa, hey, wait a minute, I'm joking about me. Let me joke about me. You joke about you. All right. Now, I say that, but to a certain degree, hey, you kind of open the door if you're like making your own jokes, and then but when quote unquote the door's open and everybody's kind of joking about something, and somebody started it by joking on themselves, and then it continues, well, oftentimes it gets out of hand and nobody means for it to. And so it just has to be, you know, somebody's just got to come up, somebody that's not the subject of the joke needs to come up and say, hey guys, come on now, that's a little, things are getting a little out of hand, you know. So a third party comes in and kind of dissolve the situation. And the best way for that to work is, you know, when everybody's joking about, you know, so-and-so's got hippie hair and all that, and then AJ comes to me and says, Dad, they're getting a little out of hand, and, you know, and I say, yeah, you need to get your hair cut. But anyways, I'll calm it down. Okay. And so I say, hey, listen, guys, let's lay off the hippie jokes and let's talk about the bald guys. No, I'm just kidding, because I'm bald. But anyways, you know what? Sometimes, though, the bald thing really bothers people, or short bothers people, you know. And then some people it doesn't. You know, there's this certain guy that on the Baptist history tours, I mean, he's like, I don't know how tall he is. He's shorter than me, but everybody picks on him because he picks on everybody else. And, you know, he even wore a drill sergeant hat. But you know what? Brother Gary, you know what, though? It's all in fun. But you know what? I'll bet you that the short jokes do sometimes bug him. You know, like he'd get up and say, all right, everybody listen up. You know, he's on the bus and somebody say, hey, Brother Gary, stand up. You know, and, you know, he laughs, you know, he's like, you know, and he'd rib him back. But you know what? Some of those jokes, though, sometimes do hurt. And so, you know, I go to him after, if I hit him with one or whatever, I'll go to him afterwards. I say, hey, brother, I'm really not, I don't mean any harm by that. I hope I didn't offend you or anything. And usually he's like, no, man, it's, you know, whatever, you know. And I'm like, you know, I love you, brother. I don't want to offend you about this, you know. And so I'm careful about that. Some people aren't. Come on in. Some people aren't careful about that. Just have a seat right there. Or there you go. Yeah. So some people aren't careful about that. Some people rib you up one side and down the other, and you're all bruised up and stuff. And then you know, you're talking and they're like, what? You know, what are you upset about? You know, and then sometimes, you know, they just have to be taken aside by somebody else, third party, and say, hey, man, you know, it might have seemed like it was all in fun, but man, you're really tearing that guy up and he hurts. You know, it's inappropriate. That's not good. And then they correct it. Go on in and have a seat. We'll be done in about 2 hours. You're gonna offend me. You walk out of here. Anyways, you have a seat. So the source of offense, by the way, if all of us were totally, perfectly spiritually mature, none of us would ever get offended. And none of us would ever offend anybody. Because we would be, what is it that James chapter 3 says? I said James chapter 2 before, but James chapter 3, what is it here? Let's take a look. Come on in. James chapter 3. Man, we're just going to keep on going. I mean, seems like every 5 minutes somebody else comes in, so we're just going to keep on going. And by the time we get done, the whole place will be filled up. It'll be people sitting on laps and everything. All right, James chapter 3. Really? Just drag them on in. All right, so James chapter 3, it says, my brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. What masters are the people that teach, people that speak. He says, we shall receive the greater condemnation. Why? Because we're constantly talking, right? And people hear what we say. It says, for in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in horses' mouths, and he goes on down here. But the point is, as he's talking about it here, yes, he gets into the tongue. It's a little member, and it boasteth great things, and it says it's set on fire of hell. Whoa. Listen, if we were all perfect, none of us would offend anybody else. So I want to make sure that we look at it both sides, because yes, the Bible says in, I believe it's either Psalms or Proverbs, great peace have they which love thy law, and nothing shall offend them. That's wonderful to say if you're the one being offended. But if you're the one that has offended, that verse isn't allowed to be quoted. If you're the one that has done the offending, you don't quote that verse. You're just making it worse. But if you're the one being offended, then it's a good verse to remind yourself of. I shouldn't be offended. But if you're the one that has done the offending, this is the passage to remind yourself of. I want to be a perfect man. I want to be mature. I want to be spiritually grown up. I want to be, as it says, let's see here, a wise man and endued with knowledge. How am I going to be that way? By not offending in word. By the way, most of the time, when we offend, I'd say probably 98% of the time when we offend, it's something we say, not necessarily something we do. Sometimes, though, something we do or do not do offends. And most of the time when that happens, it's because the person who's offended is very offendable. But otherwise, it's usually something we say. And by the way, if something you say offends somebody, you're wrong. If you're offended by something someone says, you're wrong too. Yeah. So when I get offended, I can go back to that verse. Great peace have they which love thy law, and nothing shall offend them. And then I can get it right with God and say, God, I must not be right somewhere. And that's why my heart allows me to be offended in this area. So, Lord, forgive me for not accepting your grace in this area. Help me to correct that in my life so I'm not offendable. And then help me to correct the issue, the offense with the other person, and help them so that they won't be offending others. And then if I'm the person who's offended, I go right back here to this passage. Say, Lord, I messed up. Help me. Help me not to do that again. And then sometimes I might say, hey, brother, help me, please. I mess up in this area, and I need you to help me, remind me to be careful, not to mess up in this area. Because accountability is very helpful. You say, hey, and whether it's offense or or something else, any other problem that you struggle with, accountability is helpful. You say, hey, brother so-and-so, I need help here. Please help me. So offenses can happen from words. They can happen from deeds. They can happen from, doctrine as well. Most of the time, the tongue is causing the offense. Most of the time. So tonight's message kind of reviewed a little bit of part 2. And we didn't get into where I was going to get into part 3 at all. So I'm going to change this 3 on my paper to 4. But I thought it was important because I want to make sure that we get this. Now we're going to talk about how to deal with it. We're going to talk about, you know, the danger of offenses, the nature of offenses, you know, private offenses versus public offenses. We're going to talk about reacting and all of these things. But I sometimes we just got to kind of like, hey, throw out and put the tire on the road and make that rubber just do what it's supposed to do, and say, hey, we need to kind of like cap it up and use it, make it usable first, and then we start dealing with all the theory and theology behind it. Make sense? Sometimes we take it for a test drive and then we figure out how it works. And I feel like I kind of been doing this thing on offenses a whole lot because, you know, offenses are often like the most, it's like probably one of the most common problems in churches is offenses. And whether it's, you know, somebody causing offense, instigating offense, or being offended and not revealing the offense to anybody. So that's another thing that happens often is somebody will get offended and then they won't deal with the issue. Or sometimes they'll get offended and they'll spread the offense around to other people and not go to the person that offended them. And then the next thing you know, half the church is offended at this one guy and he doesn't have a clue he's like, why is everybody mad at me? You know, nobody told him. Everybody's just mad at him, talking about him behind his back. Well, that's not right. That's not good. So now, is it appropriate to go get a third party to fix the offense? Yeah, it is sometimes. Sometimes it is appropriate to have a third party fix the offense. By the way, pastor's not always the best third party to do that. I'm willing to, but if there's another brother that will hear the offense and take action to correct it, you can take it to another brother that way. However, if there's another brother who will hear the offense and it stops there, that was nothing more than spreading the offense from one person to another. Even if they say, oh, it's not going to bother me. Now their thought of that person is going to be, oh, that person's an offender. He offends this other person. Or maybe their thought of you is, oh, that person just gets offended. Well, the important thing is that if it goes beyond the two primary parties, that the only reason it goes beyond the two primary parties is to correct it. But the offense should never just stay with one person. It needs to be corrected. It needs to be dealt with. It may be wise for it to be held for a very short time, though, so that the proper time to deal with it comes up. You know, so like, you know, instead of like what Brother John was saying, it's not always appropriate to bring it up while it's happening, because then it just ends up being a fight. Sometimes you just wait a little while and you say, okay, Lord, show me the right time to bring this up. Let's deal with it. Make sense? Any questions or thoughts on all that? I know there was a bunch of wheelbarrow full of stuff. Yes, sir.
Know that I'm in a bad situation or a tough situation, someone it really doesn't affect me as much as if I think I'm in a really good positive situation, and all of a sudden something like that.
Yeah.
Like a perfect example of when I first got the good news, a person on the staff, you know, made a comment to me. It was like right around after dinner. He made a comment to me. He says, "Hey, boy, you see that piece of fried chicken on the table? Why don't you do me a favor and go over there, eat and go gobble, 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 gobble." And I looked at him, and I mean, I wasn't angry or upset about it because already my thoughts of him up to that point was, okay, he's a negative person, and he's probably trying to get to it.
Just what you expected.
Yeah, it was what I expected. So I wasn't angry about it. It's funny how the tides have turned now.
Sure.
Later that, you know, I'm losing weight and he's gaining weight.
Right. You got to be careful. No payback. God's paying them back. Yeah, sometimes he is. Yeah. So, and that makes sense too. And sometimes and often, in fact, we pretty much, I can flat out guarantee those who are closest to you or those who you have the highest expectations for will offend you the most. That's what happens. Those that you, now, here's some people's response. If I don't get close to anybody, I'll never get offended. Wrong. That's the wrong mentality. That's wrong. Get close to people. Don't let them offend you by not being offendable. Yeah, I just got that today. It's a good. I haven't read it all, but I looked at it. It's kind of cool. So yeah, don't avoid getting close to people because you're afraid of getting offended or getting quote unquote hurt. Most of the time when we get hurt, it's not always just the other person's fault. Sometimes it's our fault too. But when it is their fault, deal with it right. And the right way to deal with it isn't to shoot them or beat them up. The right way to deal with it is to go to them and say, and properly with the right attitude, help them with that issue. Hey, and it's even better if you recognize a similar issue in your life, then you can come from that perspective. Hey, I used to struggle with this and I'm noticing that it's something that you're doing and it's kind of dangerous and it's hurtful. And God revealed to me how much I hurt other people when I acted that way or talked that way or said those kind of things. And I just want to make sure that you don't go down the same road that I was going down. And I want to prevent you from the same hurt that I caused and had. You know what I'm saying? So that it gives you a perspective of experience as opposed to, hey man, why are you always beating up on people? You know what I'm saying? So it's better received.